Hi, I'm Sarah Allen with CCX News, and we have the privilege of being joined by the co-writer of The Chosen, Ryan Swanson. Ryan, thank you so much. We welcome you. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Well, as you know, The Chosen has been widely successful. It's been seen by 280 million people in 175 countries and counting. When you think of its reach, what is it like for you to just be part of that?
Those numbers are staggering, and I don't think we ever have shifted our focus enough to really wrap our heads around, like the numbers or the number of languages that Come and See has translated into are now somewhere like 60 some languages that we've been translated into, and you know those numbers surrounding the show's impact and where it goes feel like they're not in our control. And
Mhm.
so our job has, thankfully, through all um 6 seasons now, we just wrapped production on season 6, has stayed pretty small. It's always a blank page and a blinking cursor, and it's Dallas Jenkins, Tyler Thompson, and I uh, communicating either on the phone or by text or by video conference about how are we going to get through this this second act, or how do we want to start this this new episode, this two-part episode, just writing questions, right? Because we're not as Dallas is fond of saying, we just bring in our loaves of fish, and we're super thankful that people have found the show.
You talked a little bit about the collaborative process. You're one of 3 writers on the show. Does everyone bring something different to the table, and what do you think your strength is?
Definitely, we're all very different writers. We all have a very different approach, for starters. I was trained in Hollywood with an Academy Award-winning screenwriter named Akiva Goldsman, who told me one day. I came to him. I said, I'm blocked. I feel writer's block." And he kind of closed the door, sat me down. He said, "You're not an artist. You're a plumber." He was being hyperbolic, but he was trying to get the point across that this is a job that people do, and you approach it with principles that apply to stories. And that isn't to make anything that we're doing impersonal, but it is to say that, we can see the sort of architecture within the Bible, the inspiration that they created the mold. So when we're reading the stories of the Bible, it is just packed with the craft of writing. It's great literature.
Lazarus, come out!
And
Mhm.
so, similarly, when we're sitting down and writing a story that has to be 52 minutes long, that has 4 acts, that has, a myth arc going through every episode, a single episode arc, multi-episode arcs wrap up about midway through the season. Everything is just, it has a structural place. So that's one of the things that I bring to the table when we're in a session and guys are just throwing out ideas about what could go into this episode, stories from the Bible. Um, I'm at that time oftentimes just kind of catching them and placing them um on a timeline, saying, well, do we have anything a little more uplifting here? Do we have Yeah, so I guess I'm the structuralist. I like to think that I'm good with dialogue. Dallas is a director. He's a director first, and so he is always looking at, like, the big picture and how we're going to bring these relationships together. He's also a really he's a really sensitive guy. I don't know if that comes across in the people who watch his BTS and his live streams, but, like, Dallas is masterful at those one-on-one scenes where characters are sort of, can't say exactly what they mean all the time, but they're kind of digging around the edges of the truth and finding it in each other and pulling new things out of each other. Those are wonderful moments that Dallas does. And then our show has a kind of, a poetic core to it, that is often the result of Tyler Thompson, who fans of our show will have seen one of his holiday monologues he does on our Christmas specials. There have been several monologues that characters give right to the screen, and Tyler is always the genius behind those. And so that poetry, with those great lines that you hear. My partners are really, really talented guys, and I think that it's probably the question I'm asked the most when I meet someone is like, who wrote this line? And when I say we all did, like
Mhm.
that is usually the truth. But there are times when like, a great line was written by someone in particular and it just never got adjusted all the way through the process. And the actors said it exactly as we wrote it. Sometimes they don't.
It must be incredible to be working with such an amazing team that you guys all just seem to click. A lot of people would say one of the great things about The Chosen is just the portrayal of the disciples, and you came up with such interesting backstories. For it seems like for all of them, you were able to bring something different to light.
Throw this down for a catch.
But in particular, people I think have been really struck by Matthew, whose character is on the autism spectrum, and then also little James with his physical disability. Where did those ideas come from?
Great question. When we started with season one, we Sarah, we never knew we were going to be able to do all 8 episodes of season one. In fact, we there was very little chance that we were going to be able to do a season two. So um, we really poured into the characters that we were going to be writing about in those first 4 episodes, and that included Matthew, Mary Magdalene, Simon Peter, Andrew, and others, Nicodemus. But we were we were taking we the process was the same with every one of them. We took what we knew about them from the Bible, their biblical moment to shine, as you will, if you will. Some of the characters have very little written about them, and so we only knew where they were in relation to somebody. Maybe they had a line, maybe a line like Nathaniel's. What good could come out of Nazareth? Um, Whatever that line was or that moment was, and we just started to look at the situation of their life. For Matthew, it's very extreme situation.
When you realize that nobody else in the world cares what happens to you, you think only about yourself.
As a tax collector, he would have been seen as a traitor to his people. He would have had to suffer the sort of social exile that came with that job. He would have had to be somebody who either stood out to the Romans or was even more rarely applied to have this kind of outcast position. He had to be good with numbers, and we started to kind of work this back, and it started to slot into, a couple of different personality types. And then it was Dallas who said, that could also describe somebody who's on the autism spectrum. And he had personal experience with autism in his family, and he has a daughter with autism spectrum, and has a brother also on the spectrum. And so it opened up for him a sort of a personal vein for him to see who Matthew was and how he might respond to different situations. The most extreme situation, of course, when his world stopped making sense and he encountered Jesus, and was taken enough from, as we know from the Bible, the biblical description is that Jesus walked by his booth, said, "Follow me," and he said, "I will."
Matthew. Yes, you. Follow me.
And so to create a three-dimensional character who obviously has, goals and needs and fears, for him to just make that snap decision, knowing what his life was like. We did that with Matthew, and it bent the way that it did because, and this is a good example for how we approached all the material that we cover in the Chosen. Everything in the Bible is exactly as we show it. We don't alter it. What we do is we recognize that the Bible doesn't always tell us how a story got from A to F. And so it gives us clues about what B, C, D, and E might have been like, but we're sort of plausibly filling in spaces there. And to make it a show that, we had this chance, right, to write this story of the Bible, and no one was going to see it. That's how we started, Sarah. It's like no one's ever going to see this, but it could be awesome because it's the Bible, and we've got a few bucks to maybe make 4 episodes. So we always went for it, and we approach the scripts now the same way. But that's how we came up with the character of Matthew and Simon. We poured ourselves personally into these characters, and so once they told us, yes, you can make the remaining 4 episodes of season one and even a season two, we just did the same process over and over again. We pulled every mention of our characters out of the Bible and started to try to create a 3D picture of who they might be.
And what about little James, especially with the episode where little James asks to be healed, and then Jesus says, "No, I have something even bigger in mind for you." How did you develop his backstory?
Awesome. I'm sorry I forgot that when you first asked, but it's an awesome question. Well, we wrote Little James as uh, one of the first disciples we encountered. We did not write him with any of his physical attributes. What happened was Jordan Ross auditioned for the role, and we said he is unmistakably Little James. And so as we were gathering, our flock, and we were selecting this group of people, which at times felt like appointments. We just like James Jordan was the little James we didn't know we needed. And so once we had him cast, we realized that there's certain biblical material that would lead us to a place, the conversation that you're referencing. How could we send him out on a 2x2 mission with another one of his brothers to go heal people if he himself were visibly pushing through circumstances that he might ask for healing?
Mhm.
And so we wanted to force that conversation. We couldn't, we're going through the 7 episode journey alongside our viewers. Like, and sometimes we're fans like our fans. And we go, we want to see this conversation. I mean, artistically, I want to see how Jonathan Rumi and Jordan Ross do with that material, because they are awesome and super talented, and they've embodied these characters as much as people can. But really, we're like, that demands some answers, and so we're responding to the story that we're writing in real time sometimes. And that was one of the examples of it. When we were in season three, we were like, we gotta address this.
You and the writers have given such great moments, but then, as you know, you can't include everything, right? And so you've had to make some choices. And
Yeah.
I know there's some people out there that would maybe be disappointed with that the transfiguration scene was not covered. Or Zacchaeus. Where's Zacchaeus in the story? So can you
Mhm.
talk to either of those for us, and how you made the choices of what to include and what just, I guess, didn't fit in?
The Bible is perfect. It's exactly the right length it's supposed to be. It covers exactly the stories that that God needed us to hear, and all of those stories are important and have had an impact on us. We are three screenwriters who are trying to keep the emotional stories of 15 characters relevant, emotional, timely, and do it in a pace that requires we finish an episode in somewhere between 48 to 65 minutes. If people have been with us, they've seen those numbers vary greatly at times.
My whole life, I have wondered if I would see this day.
The stories of the Bible are not interchangeable. Sometimes if we have a moment where John the Baptist sends messengers to Jesus to ask, are you the one, or do we need to look for somebody else? That takes us on a journey that then we can't just pause from and go do something else that we really want to see on screen, or we really want to do for our characters. um you know uh, Abe and George, who play Big James and John, have been the biggest champions of the Transfiguration. Jonathan has been a huge advocate for that moment, and as it turns out, we might do it in another series, because just as we've responded in real time to the demands of this story going in places, we're not writing those scripts in a vacuum. We're also, as the show gets bigger, the opportunities for our production company 5 and 2 have grown also, and we've signed a deal with Amazon to continue to do series from the Bible for their platform. And so they've given us this um, amazing, unthinkable opportunity to keep telling these stories in the same way we told The Chosen. So we are right now compiling stories from the New Testament that we want to go into places like Acts, like maybe even a Moses series. That how could those two things, on the timeline they are, how could they be at the same place? But just as The Chosen has given us a look at Moses and Jacob, those series might move back and forth through history, because it's all related. The Old Testament is just prelude to the new. The new is not doing its job. Jesus wasn't doing his job if he wasn't connecting the dots of prophecies past, and um, so the stories are all connected, and I just ask for the grace of our audience to know that these are important to us too, and we are just as anxious to hopefully get back to some of those great moments, um, and characters, and tell them in a new way.
So stay tuned, I guess. You might
Stay
just do
tuned.
what you want
Yes,
later on. What have people said about your portrayal of Judas?
I do believe that Jesus is most likely the Messiah.
Why?
Why what?
Why do you believe that?
I've seen too much.
Then why are you doing this?
Have you been listening to the feedback? Do people like it? And obviously you took a lot of time developing his story. You show him with a sister.
Make us proud.
He's in business with someone.
I have heard enough about Judas to know that there are some people who are upset that he is not more hateable. That was early feedback. I heard alongside that people saying, "I hate you guys that you made Judas so likable and understandable." I heard a third tier of feedback from people who said, "I really see myself in Judas." And I've never stopped to think, have I been so stuck on an idea that, Jesus was trying to pry me off of. And, you know, we look, we understand all three takes. We are all three of those commenters also. There's times when we um sort of reluctantly treat him with a grace that you can only do as a parent or author, where you're like, I have to let this this little creation get some water and some sunlight. um our approach to Judas was the same approach that we took to Matthew, to Simon Peter. It was to look at what he had done. And, if you've done that for 11 of your other disciples, and you've taken the time, and look, we're not saying the show is perfect or that the portrayal is, exactly as they were. In our story, our approach was always, let's look at what we know about them and build the story backwards. A big part of Judas's story is that he was a disciple of Jesus Christ on earth.
I'm ready to do hard things.
Well, in that case, Judas, follow me.
He was these other 11 guys were not you know oblivious to who they were traveling with. They would have had to stay in the same structures at night. They would have had to rely on each other for laundry and for all their tasks that going through life required. I don't know if you've ever been on a team, Sarah, but if somebody stands out with glowing eyes, and they're always twirling their mustache, and giving you the
Mhm.
wrong size log so your tent collapses every time, like, they're gonna kick you out. Like, Jesus chose him. And
Mhm.
so that character, we started to think about a guy who was just, and we've all known them, and we've all been this person who's just like, I think I'm right about this. I think I'm right.
Gosh.
New
Mhm.
facts come in. No, no, no. You know what? I think I'm right about this.
We haven't seen season 6 yet either, and that's where I think Judas's story kinda comes to an end, so there's a lot to be
Yes.
seen left in that.
I forget where we're at. Tyler and I are working on our drafts of season 7 right now, and season 6 just wrapped. So that always happens concurrently. When we're shooting 4, we're working on 5, and so we're sometimes then when we talk about 3, it feels so old, but
Mhm.
that's the same with 5 right now. So or I forget that he's just sort of popping. He's really the big betrayal in season 5 is look, he was possessed by the spirit of evil, but there is a moment when the Bible says he was now possessed by the spirit of evil, of Satan. But there was a lot of time before that he wasn't.
Judas.
Welcome, Judas. I'm sure you're gonna love this sermon.
Oh, I wouldn't miss it.
And what were the traits that
Mhm.
predisposed him to be available to that insidious draw of of Satan? What was in his spirit that we can show in a TV show, right? This imperfect sort of translation of the perfect piece of literature, where we just couldn't, we couldn't make him evil from, it just didn't track for us. And the fact is, like Jordan Ross, when Luke Dimian showed up and he auditioned, he also created for us a feedback loop where we knew who we were writing to. We knew what this actor's strengths are. And one of Luke's wonderful qualities is that he's just so darn likable. And he's vulnerable, and he wears his heart on his sleeve. And all of those things started to make their way into how we colored that character. And so that wonderful kind of feedback loop of going, but this is going to be in Luke's mouth. So how then does Luke get this across? Maybe we want to pull it back and have him be kind of little brother to a couple of these guys. They can be a little more harsh with him because they are kind of the big brother to him. And so that became an aspect of the characterization. And you know, I think it's wonderful when people have a strong reaction one way or another to the chosen. They're often driven back into their Bibles to go fact check us, to go kind of relive that moment. In some cases, to go, was this actually in the Bible? um, those are all super exciting for us. So it's you know it's kind of a win for the chosen if we get people back into their Bible. They fact check us. Hey, this season, this holiday would have been in a different time of the year. We're like, yes, you are correct. And what time? It feels like, yes, you're totally right. Thank you for caring enough to check us.
Pointing that out.
And
Well, is there anything that you wish you could have done differently then?
there's been various things that have been pointed out to us that didn't a location. I remember a holiday. The flora was different. Like the trees had no leaves on them, and we were doing one of the spring holidays, and we were like, "I hear you," but we were shooting in Texas in October, and you know what, we did the best we could with the budget we have. And actually what there's this scene in, oh gosh, it's season 2 where Mary is walking on this road and she's passed by a Roman, and it sort of triggers something in her. um and James Cunningham, our production designer, had gone out and with his team had glued, Sarah, they had glued pomegranates onto this very dead tree. And so
Oh,
all of the pomegranates you see Liz as Mary Magdalene picking before this moment had been glued
oh
individually
my.
by the members of and so when those are the things we're up against, and somebody says, yeah, but this would have been in a different time of year, we're like, we get you, we love you, let's keep going back into your Bible and fact checking us. Like, that's the best outcome that ever have hoped for. So no, there's been controversies about the portrayal, but I think these are honest differences of opinion. Would Jesus have ever had to rehearse a sermon?
I've been forming fragments of teaching in my mind for some months now, and I'm ready to organize them.
Would he ever have had to work through the language of what him as fully God and fully man needed to say to get through to fully human being audience? Like, would he have said, or would he just have known? Now that debate seemed huge when we were having it, and it's still just as relevant today, but the online traffic for it isn't that much. I can tell you that pastors felt seen. We heard so many pastors who said, I felt seen by this. And what it allowed us to do, and our our audience to do, was to engage in that debate, which is to try to wrap our heads around what it was like for Jesus Christ as fully God and fully man at any given moment. How far ahead can he see? We call it the God lens, God eyes. Like, does he also know concurrently in 250 miles away this thing is happening? And we're like, we don't we try not on our show to use the God eyes all the time. And so we try to walk him through Lazarus and what was going on with Lazarus while the disciples were elsewhere in Israel. is a good example of that. How much does he know real time? How much does he sort of suspect and putting aside for now? How much is he sort of orchestrating this for this moment for his disciples to go and see what resurrection looks like? How much of it, so we're just sort of working through it. But these are the things that come up that they could have gone either way, right? We may have shown Jesus out on a foggy night, not rehearsing his speech, but we that was the one we chose, and it wasn't unbiblical. We didn't feel, but we thought it was plausible. So there's nothing we would go back and do differently, but there are details that could have gone either way.
Why do you think the show has been such a global success?
That's a great question. Um, well, not what I think. Why has the show been a global success is a great question. I think it's like one of these high concept things that come out occasionally, like a film or a TV show, a book comes out, and a good high concept movie comes out, and everybody goes, "Oh, of course." Like there's a part of you that goes, "Oh, they haven't made a movie about that yet? They haven't made a movie about this thing that I think about all the time." For us, it wasn't that there aren't other biblical portrayals. There are, and they're wonderful, and some of them have impacted us greatly. Um, but we hadn't seen one done this way. I think that Dallas was and Tyler were really onto something because they were making these chosen-esque short films for their church in Illinois. I saw The Two Thieves, the film about the thieves who were on the cross next to Jesus. And that was the same day he and I first met. So that was at the North Hollywood Film Festival. And I thought, this is such a brilliant lens on these stories because they've always been sort of ruined for me by either feeling wooden and laconic if they're only portraying the red lines of the Bible, and then all the other 12 characters are just sort of moving around like plot bots. We don't understand any of the choices anybody's making at any given time, except for that it's in the Bible and it's faithful to that story to the letter. That wasn't what the Bible was trying to do for us, right? That its authority, its impact is unquestionable, beyond the pale. It's perfect. What we're trying to often do in a screened portrayal is to relate, to create an a character whose emotional life is available to us, and then we sort of go on the journey with them. And what Dallas and Tyler had found was this way to give pathos to those characters who would have just been background people in other portrayals or in the Bible itself, as it talks about Jesus' ministry. So in telling their story, there's a lot of imagination. There's a lot of imagination you get to use as you move a character from one point to another, and to imagine all the life in between. So that was always the premise of this show, was to say, this is Jesus' life from the eyes of those who knew him, through the eyes of those who knew him.
His care is for women, for the vulnerable.
Blasphemy is not harmless.
Well, the Pharisees were pretty upset.
Sometimes you gotta stir up the water.
And so it just allowed us to do a kind of projected version of how every time we read the Bible, we feel impacted, we feel emotional. We get to, have you ever had like a song that you just loved and you were showing it to your friend for the first time? I think everybody's had that experience of like, oh, a TV show, you got to see this, you've got to see this. It's almost like we got to see 12 people do that with Jesus, to show somebody else like, oh my gosh, you got to see what this guy can do. you have no idea like what he did impacted me personally and ironically, and on the day I needed it, like, and I was right at the edge of the Red Sea, and then this guy, so we get to walk through all of those experiences with the disciples.
I have chosen you 12 as my apostles.
Don't feel any different?
I don't need you to feel anything to do great things.
And I think that experience is something we've all had ourselves. We've all wanted to say to somebody, you got to come to church. You don't know, like, I can't even tell you what this seeing a sunrise this morning meant to me. Or, getting a parking space in front of the building when I was on, I was late for the job interview that I needed to feed my kids. Like, wherever those God shots are, we've wanted to tell them and to somebody, because how they struck us is almost not translatable.
Hmm.
And so the Chosen allows us to walk through that experience with all these people.
We have a problem. Jesus operates entirely outside our jurisdiction. Woe to you, scribes and
There's stories of people coming to the Christian faith after having seen The Chosen, and, maybe it's gotten them to read their Bible more. How has that impacted you?
Those ideas are like when you hear about like what a supernova is in space, and that a sun that was 20 times bigger than our sun like collapsed in on itself, and it exploded in the sky, like the idea almost shorts me out. I'll be honest, Sarah, like I've heard that many times from different people, and I don't know if it's that God is just kind of moving me past and saying, this isn't the time for you to think about that, or to be worried about the comments from a choice that you all made, or to consider the enormity of where the show has gone. You just keep doing your work. I feel like that's the season that God has me in, because even when you ask me the question directly, and I think about the example after example of letters that the show has received from distant places, or from people who are incarcerated, or from uh, people who were impacted by Jesus' conversation with little James. I feel this deep desire to deflect and go, Sarah, the Bible did that.
Hmm.
Like the material that we're um, a, a, a reflection of, or that we're trying to reflect, or that we very imperfectly through three heads sort of distilled from it, and spun up a new way of looking at that story, or a new lens on that story. That's about as far as I can go. Like, so when I hear that story and I go, of course it did. Of course it did. It wasn't this show. It was a reflection of what the Bible is capable of doing. And what TV allows is, it allows us to go into those places, and Come and See knows this very well. It allows us to take the show into a place where somebody might be resistant or might be unable to open a Bible and read what's God's word. There are people who just can't read it, and so a TV show allows us to say, hey, go check out the source material. You've seen the show, now read the book. Like, that you'll see how much greater it is. And so all of those experiences are extraordinarily humbling. We did a meet and greet at Chosen Con, Sarah,
Hmm.
and I was like, this is impossible. Every one of these people that comes along has a 15-minute story. There's 10 minutes of me trying to catch my breath. There's high fives afterwards, or hugs, or and like, you just don't have the time, and so we deflect, because this isn't us. We're not, uh we're telling the Bible's story. So it is really the Bible's impact, and we're super grateful to be able to sort of project it into places that the Bible isn't going or hasn't gone yet.
Well, my last question may be hard for a screenwriter, but if you were to describe your chosen journey in a sentence, what would you say?
My chosen journey has gone
Mhm.
from skeptical enthusiasm, to being in the thick of camaraderie, and coming out the other side awed and grateful, and at times exhausted,
Mm. Ryan, thank you so
but
much.
ready. Thank
But
you,
ready, and we're
Sarah.
so ready for season 6, and
Yeah.
we can't wait
Well,
to see season 7 too. It's what you're working on right now.
oh, thank you so much. It's so great to be back in Minnesota, be talking to a fellow Minnesotan, on a station that I used to watch. So, really, really grateful. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ryan.